Hello, this is Comedy Slab. Or is it The Comedy Slab? I mean, I'm not aware of any others. Do we call it The Comedy Slab?
You're like a mind reader. That was the first thing I was going to go, excuse me, I think it's the Comedy Slab.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, right, we'll start with an error. Start as you mean to go on. Anyway, I am Adrian. I'm in the southeast of England. His Nibs is in the Midlands. We are connected umbilically thanks to Skype, but you don't have to look at the picture that I do. I'm doing it purely to try and make a better show. Put that tongue away, please.
That was my best Gene Simmons impression, that was.
Gene Simmons.
And I don't mean the 50s Hollywood actress. I mean the lead singer from Kiss.
Oh, right, yes. You look like Kiss, but without the makeup.
I certainly do.
Oh, perhaps we should kiss and makeup.
Mm. Can I just say you were doing a fabulous Frank Carson impression and told a really good Frank Carson-esque joke? Before
I don't know if I could. I think you're taking the mick anyway because it wasn't that good.
It was good. Yeah. But all I wanted to say was I forgot to tell you before we started that a mate of mine who's in corporate entertainment hired Frank, God rest his soul, to do some entertainment and comparing and stuff like that. And he stayed with him. It was over 2 nights, and he stayed with him in the hotel. And they, for some reason, I don't know why to this day, they shared a twin room.
That sounds like a Morecambe and Wise setup.
This is true. This is, and Frank said, "Oh, I don't mind. I'm not bothered. I couldn't care." He's such a. Did you ever meet him?
I did. Yeah. Noel Edmonds shows. He was on Noel's house party.
Did you find him gorgeously lovely? He's a fantastic guy. Just.
Oh yeah, very warm-hearted. But he was never off. He was never off stage. He would tell jokes. Just like you and I breathe.
Yeah.
And. Yeah, sorry, I don't think you'd finished your anecdote.
I must admit, no, I had seen him serious chatting. I've chatted with him just like, normal stuff and just talking about normal things. And it was.
Well, had you interviewed him?
No, we were just sat backstage. We were just in the green room and we were just chatting away. And that's the kind of guy he was. He'd want to know all about you. So what are you doing? And where are you from? And where's your dad from? And that was the kind of guy he was, sort of thing.
Well, it helps. You of course, you have Irish antecedents.
Yes.
Isn't it your antecedents Irish?
My antecedents is Irish, but my uncle Cedents is not.
Why they've got the same name, I'll never know.
Me uncle Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Oh, he's a cracker.
But anyway, it's just a quick story, and this is my mate Jeff is adamant that this happened, and he said that in his sleep, Frank.
Don't tell me he was telling jokes.
He used to either go, and he never to this day knew whether he was doing it as like
being awake and pretending.
Yeah. I just think that is just so Frank Carson. It's lovely. What a great story. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I remember him in the many breaks in rehearsal because something technical's going on. Half the time it was our fault in the sound department. No, probably not that many times. But he would just sidle over to Noel and tell him some jokes. Like, it's almost like, I've got to fill the space available. Got to keep the energy up. And this is in rehearsal, for goodness sake.
It's old another time.
Well, yeah, it's very old school. But then another time I was taking a group round the Beeb with a colleague and we were at reception of BBC Television Centre as was before it was turned into a different type of TV centre and all that. And I caught him out the corner of my eye and then he couldn't resist. There was a crowd and I saw him bit by bit. He was going sort of edging in inch by inch and he was sort of waddled and you could see, and I could see it from the back. I thought, right, he's going to perform. And sure enough, he just looked for a break. He wasn't rude and butted in when my colleague was talking to them. But he just looked for a little pause, and then he was away. That was it. Of course, the group loved it. They were perfect age group for him.
It's funny, isn't it, as well, that never off thing can be quite... I've interviewed Ken Dodd a couple of times. And whilst I found him hugely entertaining and funny, I found him frustrating in equal measure as an interviewer that you could never break the facade, and he wouldn't let you. Very rarely you'd see a little glimpse of the real Ken Dodd come through, and then he'd kind of check himself and he'd be off again.
Yeah.
Doing his gags. But then, I always remember he was when he was having the trouble with the tax.
Oh yeah.
And he said, and I said, is it true, Ken? I said that they found was 250,000 in his loft, wasn't there? In a holdall,
in a bag or something. Yeah.
And he said, and I said, was that true? I said, because all the papers were reporting it. No, he said, no, he said, absolutely categorically denied it. It wasn't true. He said it was in a duffel bag.
Brilliant. But he couldn't help himself. For a moment, you thought you were going to get to the truth there, didn't you?
Yeah. You think, he's reacted to it. He's bit on it, but he hadn't. He never really. And I found that really frustrating, really, as as an interviewer working and trying to get to you can never crack the facade, which is, you kind of feel like you've failed then, don't you? Because you've interviewed people, and if you've not managed to either connect with them or break down that barrier, you think, I've not really gotten the best out of this. But yeah.
But then it would be you and everyone else who's ever interviewed them. It's a shame in a way. And I think sometimes they put themselves under too much pressure. It's like Elvis, okay, not a comedian, but would never leave the house without being dressed as Elvis.
Yeah, it's almost like putting a costume on, isn't it, in a way? It's that.
Yeah.
I tell you, the most disarming, and he was a comedian, the most disarming person I ever interviewed, because he was as straight as a die, and he didn't bring his character in at all. Was James Mulgrew, who people will know as Jimmy Cricket, of course. With the wellies and left and right, and I sat talking to Jimmy, and he did the whole interview. So it was lovely. It was a really nice, a real solid chat where you kind of got to find out, you got to feel for the guy and the sort of man he was, and it became more endearing than if he'd have done it as Jimmy Cricket. Really, it was that was quite disarming. It was quite amazing, really. But yeah, what a lovely guy Frank was. Though I got fond memories of him.
Yeah, bless him. Now, knowing you, would you have that James Mulgrew interview somewhere where it's stashed away?
Yeah, I've got it somewhere. Yeah.
We could even find an excuse to play a clip from it some week.
We should do, shouldn't we? We should. I should go back to the archives. The only thing is, and I don't know if you noticed, do you ever keep any of the stuff that you did on radio? Did you ever do any of that or not?
A little bit, yeah. Not a mad amount.
Because
I didn't do as much as you.
If you listen and go back to your archives, you do kind of sound like you started off broadcasting in a helium-filled room. And then as time goes on, you kind of get the dark, sexy voice that you've got now. That kind of. And then
I can't match that. But yes, also you of course were being ultra posh and southern in the early days, were you not?
I was just trying to not trying to be Birmingham. That's all. I wasn't trying to be southern. I was just trying to.
You don't see many of those, do you?
I was just
around here.
I was just going. Hello.
A special welcome to you if it's your very first comedy slab. I guess we should explain proceedings, but an equally special welcome, if that's possible, for regular listeners. We need both, and what the BBC calls replenishers for people falling off their perches at the other end. We need to keep our age profile at least, if we can, into 2 digits. Anyway, so the comedy slab, well, it's a virtual slab of comedy. The clue is in the title. We put a TV, radio, or podcast type comedy on the slab and prod it about a bit, dissect it, see who salutes, and see what we make of it. And it is only a personal opinion of myself and Shane. You're allowed to shout at your podcast playing device and disagree vehemently. And we'll give you some steers as to the anti-social media where you can agree or disagree with us or just enjoy the journey, as we hope you do. Each week we play 3 audio clips from said show, whatever the show of the week is. We take it in turns to set each other homework. Apparently I've got a cracker next week, according to you, but that's, hey, that's way down the line. Let us deal with, I think with the reason we've come into old school comedians is not simply that we are ourselves old, although there is a feature, is because this week I are mostly putting on the slab of comedy none other than Les Dawson. It's a former Radio 2 show. First one out was a Radio 2 show. More recently it's gone out as a Radio 4 extra repeat, if you will. But the original date of transmission, TX, as it's known in the trade, was the 18th of November, which by a strange coincidence later on became my BBC birthday. But I wasn't at the BBC that far back being 1979. Do you realise we're as we speak, within a few weeks of this being 40 years old, this show we're slabbing?
It's amazing, isn't it, really, when you and when you think of that time scale, because you've grown up through it as well, it doesn't seem like 40 years, does it? That's the weird thing about life, I suppose, really. But yeah. He's an absolute legend as well, isn't he, Les Dawson? I mean, he's... we were talking about old school comedians and the Frank Carsons of the world. I mean, Les Dawson is, even
of that school, even
in the higher echelons of that school, isn't he? I would dare to say,
Yeah, defo. Well, we'll get into our first of three audio clips pretty pronto. Just to say, it's a BBC Radio 2 production. And I will be name dropping at some stage, having worked with Les. But we are going to listen to Les, that's the title of the show, and listen to the first excerpt we're going to hear in this edition of the Comedy Slab. And this is a lovely way to come in. It is right at the top of the show. You'll hear the tail end of the jolly tune at the beginning that Les is singing. Very, again, that it's of that time where the comedian was expected to be a singer as well, even if they weren't exactly the great Caruso. And then we go into a beautifully written monologue, which only Les could carry off.
Hold on. A happy face. There is in the wild rolling dales of Cumbria, amid the dreaming hills and the vast green canopies of the conifer forests, a small heather-fringed lake whose mirrored surface reflects, in shimmering symmetry, the blue-rimmed sky and scudding nimbus. It is a place of silence and soft winds that gently irritate the laden branches of majestic oaks that drill in formation towards a whitewashed cottage standing beneath a frowning crag. In that cottage of ageless antiquity lives a man who, many years ago, won fame in the Olympic Games by swimming underwater for over 5 minutes. I went to interview this grand old man for a local newspaper, which in those days had a circulation as big as a flea's foot. The house was empty, and I strolled towards the clear waters of the lake and saw the old man underwater, lying on the bottom of the deepest part of the lake, in his polythene trunks.
There's a great punchline at the end of that one as well. Not one of his better ones, and it put me in mind of, and forgive me because I won't do this justice, but the one that I always remember him doing was he said, and I was sat there the one night.
Oh, yeah. I think I know where we're going with this. Yeah.
And I just did the short version of it, and he said, and I looked up at the stars, and the tumultuous stars in the sky, and he said, it was reminiscent, and he's like all this poetic poetry and all this stuff, and he said, and the thought occurred to me, he said, I thought, I must put a roof on this privy one of the days. So, I mean, the gag and the punchline I thought was good at that, as was, was good enough, but wasn't one of his better ones.
No.
And I that, to me, that was the best bit of the show.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily disagree with that. Although I've tried to reflect with the other two clips. I've tried to get two different other styles.
Yeah.
So one is more music, and one is a sketch playing off someone else. So we hear a bit of the different facets of Les. But yeah, I mean, I might say this, and maybe it wouldn't have worked out really, but I imagine that I could listen to that kind of style all evening, but maybe it would be wearying and you'd need a break for music and sketches and laughter and all that. But, well, he did just have this facility with words, which was surprising. We shouldn't be surprised that someone with... I mean, he wouldn't have had a fabulous education, a classic rough childhood. His dad used to get involved in street brawls for money. Have you read his autobiography?
He was self-educated, wasn't he? I think he was. I think he said that he was. I think he was a voracious reader, and kind of ended up educating himself. Because I mean, he's he would always tell gags, wouldn't he? You know, we were so poor kind of gags and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
he was, wasn't he? Really, I know his upbringing was really tough.
Yes. Well, as a child, it shows what a spoilt brat I was. But I just thought those. I mean, there was it was that school of that generation of comedians. It was quite common to have jokes about we were that poor we'd have water on our cornflakes.
Yeah,
and all of that. As much as it was certainly with Les about the mother-in-law jokes and so on, but it was genuine grinding poverty. And that's why we've had a couple of recessions in the last 20 years or whatever. I never feel broke because I think I was raised as a war baby, and I see my own. I suppose I didn't at the time, but I see now the privilege I've had, and I don't mean going to Eton or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're not landed gentry, but the privilege of never having to worry about the next meal and things like that. And of course, that's for a vast number of people in the West, that is taken for granted these days. But I mean, my dad wouldn't have claimed to have been in grinding poverty, but certainly they shoehorned something like 9 people into half a house. And the house these days would be expected to be normally for 4 people. So they had half that space and at least twice as many people crammed in.
I was flicking through the TV channels a little bit earlier, and I came across there was a program looking back at the Second World War, and there was an ex paratrooper on, and he was just in tears, recalling a battle he was involved in, and he said it was the worst night of my life. He said. And this is a paratrooper, so like he's the Paras regiment, so he's
not known for being softies,
not known for his emotional. He was saying he said about how the SS really respected them because of their toughness in war and all the rest of it. But he started crying and he said it was the toughest night of my life, and he must have been in his mid-80s when he was interviewed. And he said, and I still get nightmares about it now. And you kind of think of all the, I won't talk about the stuff that's happening now, but all the things that are happening now, and people are getting upset about calling each other names and all the, and all the rubbish in comparison. You think, what does that generation sit there and think when you think, this? I often say this, like they talk about poverty now, and you think these people went into a Nissan hut and sat through an air raid and come up, and their house and everything they owned was gone, and they didn't own a lot to start with.
No.
And we're telling them now, how tough it is because the kids ain't got the latest trainers. It's just like you'd be so cross, wouldn't you? Yeah. But you're right. That kind of poverty and that kind of austerity shaped that kind of comedy then, didn't it, really? So that there was a whole genre that came out of it. Do you know what I loved as well was and the start of this program was the old-fashioned announcer. You'd have
it was one of the actors, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, but things that you don't have now. You don't have an announcer. You don't have a real band because there was a real band playing, wasn't there as well? And a lot of the time you don't have a real audience, do you? But I just thought, and I settled in and I thought, this is going to be great.
So I didn't ask your headline.
How wrong
then.
I was.
Oh, don't say that. What would your headline be?
My headline would be, listen to Les if you can manage it. I found it a real, or maybe a tough listen to Les.
Really?
Yeah,
I
found it really, really hard to listen to. It was really. I didn't think it was very good at all, and I think it was the writing, and I'm doubly shocked because not only Les Dawson, but because it was produced by Jimmy Casey, wasn't it?
Oh, you know him as Jimmy. I've got him down as James Casey in front of me.
Well, I only know him thanks to Mark Radcliffe, because Mark Radcliffe did a fabulous 2-series documentary called
Northern Comics, or about Northern Comics.
Yeah, well, it's about comics full stuff. I remembered it the other day, and I can't remember what it's called now. I'll look it up in a second. I'll find it. But and one of the ones that he did was about Jimmy James, who was a sort of vaudeville comic, wasn't he? I suppose really. And Jimmy Casey is Jimmy James' son.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Because Jimmy James treated... In fact, I mentioned it to you before, Eli... Would you ever remember Eli Woods? And he used to have a stutter. He's a big, tall guy. He used to wear a flat cap, and he used to go to He was Des O'Connor's stooge for a while. He'd go, Mr. O'Connor, and he'd talk like that. That was Jimmy James' cousin, I think it was, or nephew. I can't remember which relation he was. But Jimmy James treated entertainment like a family business, like it was a corner shop or something, you know. And he'd have all his relatives involved in, and he got his son was an agent and a writer and all sorts of stuff as well. But yeah, it's a fascinating story.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. We do need to move on, but we can continue, obviously, slabbing the other side of our next clip. I'm in genuine shock over your reaction, but hey, we are now going to enjoy a sketch. So it has its own introduction, so I need to say no more.
Love in the dole queue.
Next! Come along, please. Who's next?
I opine it is I, Miss Willoughby.
Oh, Mr. Brewster. Do forgive me for speaking so sharply.
Forgive you? Would you ask me to chide the nightingale for loudly acclaiming the crescent moon?
What a charming metaphor, Mr. Brewster.
Now, you know my name is Peregrine. Or Perry for short.
Of course. Good morning, Perry. And I am not Willoughby Snitch to you.
No, to me you are Titania. Or for short. Tina.
I kind of missed a lot of what was being said. After he said Titania, he said, or for short.
Yes.
And there was like this uproar, and I'm thinking, what? I don't know what you're laughing at there.
You obviously got such a clean head. Are you serious? How might you shorten? Usually you take the first syllable, don't you? In my case, I get shortened to aid.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
And I did actually, a former girlfriend did have a friend whose name was Tiziana, and we needn't say any more, but that really was shortened to the first syllable. Right. But that's where that gag's going. Okay,
sorry, I missed it. There was a couple
Maybe
of times...
Maybe you were waiting for a sophistication that wasn't there.
I'm thinking it was more. I just wasn't on the same wavelength at all. I didn't get it. Come on, what were your thoughts then? Because I walked away from this feeling a bit saddened.
Well, I'm saddened by your reaction. I mean, for me, it was just great to hear Les's voice again. There's a lovely richness to it, which we can probably attribute, sadly, to Woodbines, which killed him in the end. Or whatever his poison was, the brand, allegedly. But, I'm surprised you found the writing weak. I mean, you sure you're not expecting too much of a 40-year-old show? I just latched into that mindset 40 years ago, which itself, you can hear echoes of Variety very strongly.
If you see, I thought that, and I thought, well, maybe I'm being a bit unkind. But then if you stand that up to something like the writing in Hancock, which was 10 years earlier, it just blows it off the face of the earth, I think. Or even something like the Glums, or Round the Horn, which we mentioned previously. I just a lot. What surprised me was that it was all written by Jimmy Casey, and I was really shocked that Les didn't write anything.
I thought the monologues were going to be him because they've become so associated with him. I mean, would your guess be that he originally did write his monologues of that style, the wordy, literary style?
Well, I just didn't get the credit. I don't know really. I would have thought if he'd have written it, he would have. I mean, he wasn't a shrinking violet, was he? In terms
no,
of...
I mean, in the early days of before he, because I mean, writers traditionally came in as soon as you went on TV or radio because you just couldn't keep up with the amount of material required.
Right.
Because you could take an act around. It was said, there were so many variety halls in the the heyday of variety in Britain, that you never had to play the same venue. You could play a different venue every night for 18 months. So you could carry the same act around for 18 months, whereas you go on the radio for 6 weeks and you need 6 shows.
Yeah.
Okay, they might not be the length of your stage show, but still, and that's where writers came in, wasn't it, really?
I think if you listen back carefully to that monologue, to me, it sounds like a joke that's been turned into the style of his monologue. I don't know if you noticed that. It kind of felt, like I was saying to you, it wasn't one of the strongest ones. And I thought, after I wondered whether it was just a gag that he did in the style of his verbose monologue kind of thing.
Right. That is possible, but that doesn't nullify it. But I agree with that one. It didn't have the strongest strongest punchline, and also I think I had to play it twice. It was slightly garbled or lost somehow.
Yeah, but I mean that sketch there as well is like kind of I don't know. It wasn't sharp or it was kind of meandering and didn't really. I felt a lot of the sketches didn't really kind of go anywhere. They were trouble finishing them.
But that's where you're not comparing like with like. If you say Hancock, I mean, what I think of as Hancock is not a sketch show.
No.
So and it is.
Round the Horn. Then I mean, Round the Horn was a sketch show with singing, and it was exactly the same format, really. But I think, the characters were better drawn, were more defined, were funnier, had catchphrases, were developed. I do wonder with supporting cast whether, not that they weren't adequate, but they weren't standout. They weren't Kenneth Williams. Even Les Dawson had Roy Barraclough. In later episodes of this show.
Was it this show?
Yeah. So
I thought that only came in with ITV. But
no, Cissy and Ada was part of. I looked it up, and Cissy and Ada was part of Listen to Les. So
right,
you kind of think it got better as time went on. So we're only listening to a snapshot in a way, but I do think if you stand it up to what was around at the time, with the exception probably of the Grumbleweeds, it would
steady.
Right, you see, but again, I got a soft spot for the Grumbleweeds. It's a swamp at the bottom of my garden. No, I've got a soft spot for the Grumbleweeds because it's that nostalgia thing for me again. So it doesn't have to be funny for me to like it because it just takes me back.
Right.
But
maybe, yeah.
No, I was going to say I don't know, but there was nothing stand out for me like the Desponds. I don't know what your final clip is that you've chosen, but.
No, it's a musical one. The Desponds I felt was a bit, by its very nature, they're very downbeat, and I thought that just wasn't showing him off, which is possibly what you're about to say.
Well, it just kind of had one gag, didn't it? It was just like they were dour, and then that kind of lost its way of talking about burying people who were still alive, and I just thought, where are we going with this? It's kind of gone. Don't know.
Maybe I'm less fussy. I don't know. It brought back very happy memories of working with him. Do you want some name dropping?
Yeah, tell us about when you worked with him.
Well, I've kind of
was that when he said the door to my office is always open? Get a screwdriver and fix it.
He might well have done. I just remember things like he was just a very warm, genial guy, exactly as you might hope if you were a fan of his that he would be. And I just remember, one week, for instance, we used to, this is Blankety Blank back in this, one of the first comedy shows.
Brilliant on that, wasn't he?
Well, I think he made it suit his style, but actually, if you think, it was Wogan who'd done it before him, wasn't it? With his funny, dinky, sticky thing.
But but Dawson, his shtick with that was that he didn't want to be there, wasn't it? And that he
and
hated
the prizes were embarrassing.
That
was true, and that worked.
But he hated it all, didn't he? He hated the not so much the contestants, but he was like really fed up that he had to be there, and that all the celebrity guests, he was like he'd take the mickey out of them. I mean that was what he did. It really deadpan, didn't he? And downbeat. I thought that was great. That was really
played to strength.
Yeah.
But I just remember one Saturday, it was the week of the Grand National, and so everything stopped because he had a flutter on the Grand National. So I can still see him now, a few rows ahead of me in the audience rostrum, looking up at the monitors, the TV sets, where the audience would be later that day. And I mean, stars are often indulged by that, like that, but I mean, not in that way. Not with live TV and not with horse racing, but, you know, if the star wants the temperature of the studio changed, it is changed regardless of, you know, I've seen camera operators with gloves on because a certain person wanted the studio so cold. I mean, in summer as well. Anyway, but everyone wanted to indulge him because he was so pleasant. Mm. And I was just remembering earlier today some of his gags. He would have, when he was off air, of course, he could repeat gags, so that was interesting to watch. Each week he'd use the same gag with a female contestant. They wouldn't rehearse the questions, of course, that was sacrosanct, but they would block it, as they say, just so they get the shots right. And so he'd walk over, they were on the left of the stage as the audience sees it, and he'd walk over to the woman and he'd say, on the night I'm going to do a little bit of chat. I can't really do Les, but anyway, do a little bit of chat. Ask how long you've been on the game, that sort of thing. And the woman would always laugh. And then he'd waddle over. And this is where I need to engage the use of some rail tickets from a journey from London only today. Because, again, it won't sound as good to you listening now, but he would put, it was actually the card with the questions on, he'd put it right over his mic, which my colleague had fitted for the rehearsal. So it's a personal mic. And he would tap it like this. Let's see if I can get close to the mic. And, you know, everything was physical with him. Comedy was physical because of his size.
Yeah.
So he'd waddle over from the contestants to where the stars were. And he'd make a point of doing that. And he would be drumming on the card with the questions on. And I remember my colleagues upstairs, I mean, this is getting a bit techie, but you and I know about limiters where the sound it's distorting, so it has to catch the noisy bits, the louder bits, and it would drive my colleagues upstairs in the sound booth, mad. But you know, he'd get a laugh out of that. He just had to waddle and tap this like he was a sort of Max Wall type thing along to the drumming of the card. So yeah, I maybe it just brings back fond memories, and maybe it's like you listening to the Grumbleweeds. You know, I listen to this, and maybe I forgive it a lot.
Yeah, I did, believe me, I really wanted to, even down to the point of one of my favourite of his characters, Cosmo Smallpiece, who in the 70s, there was the phrase that was bandied about all the while was sex maniac, wasn't it? Oh, he's a sex maniac.
Oh, and he had those glasses. Did he have pebble glasses?
Yeah,
knickers, knackers, knockers.
And even that was, I felt that was kind of in its infancy in this particular incarnation, because if you get to his TV series, again, the character's a lot more developed, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more overblown kind of. So I do think we are kind of watching, you know, a very early incarnation of the ideas that he had, and that but I really wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it. But I couldn't go with it. I just thought, it's not the right standard. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Well, I'm sorry. But see if you can suspend disbelief for the last clip for a minute or so. Because this is something I've done on the piano for years. But it'd be nice if I could play the piano properly and not have to do this shtick. But it just made me laugh out loud. I hope it does that for you, dear listener, but we'll see. So don't listen to Grumpy Draws, listen to me, and more importantly, listen to Les at the piano.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for music in the modern idiom with Fingers Dawson at the keyboard. Now, in the past, many listeners of the audience were singing out of tune. Well, I've never noticed it, but some say it's the ladies and others say it's the men who are to blame. Well, tonight we're going to find out. I'm going to play a well-known chorus, and I'd like only the ladies to sing. Now, don't forget, not the fellas, because if you do sing, we'll know there's something wrong. So the ladies only are to sing this to find out who's going out of tune. Are you ready? That's it, girls. Well, that sounded all right to me, didn't you?
And even that didn't do it for me.
Oh, you're miserable. I've given up on you.
No, it didn't, and only because I'd had such a tough 26 minutes that I kind of
You had your arms crossed metaphorically.
I guess so, and also it's kind of he was a well-known part of his act, wasn't it? You know, I mean, it's very clever, and it's so much harder to do than you realise.
But I was laughing that the audience are trying to follow him.
I know.
That's what made me laugh. And then,
sorry, I was going to say the audience ruined it for me a bit.
Oh no, I knew you were going to say that. But is it the spot laugh from that guy? I loved it. He made me laugh because he was enjoying it. Unlike you,
I thought he was his agent in the front row.
Normally, I'm with you on that. Mrs. Miggins in the third row, wherever she is, cackling Kathy, can spoil it. But this, I just absolutely made it for me because he had such a low threshold. He was so forgiving, unlike you, of the material. And he was having a good time. And that is infectious.
Yeah. There's a lovely Frankie Howard clip. I think it was one of his kind of stand-up. I think it was when he was at Peter Cook's place, The Establishment, and he was when he's or Stabbers as he called it, and there was a bloke going like that, and in the end, Frankie Howard went, "Shut it, you."
Shut your face.
It was just lovely. I mean, I felt really bad and really guilty for not. I mean, it's interesting. You know, you played that clip of the Loving the Dole queue or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then they go into this really painful thing where they're singing at each other, and it's just horrid in ways that I can't even begin to tell you. I just thought, this is just terrible, really.
You must have had a tough week.
It's interesting because I mentioned Jimmy Casey earlier, who was responsible for writing. He worked with people like Jimmy Clitheroe.
How do you mean?
He worked on Life with the Lions, I think, as well. And it's got that kind of feel to it in a way. It's it's very simple humour, shall we say? You know, it's not. There isn't a sophistication to it, I guess, at all, really. But yeah, I was just really disappointed because I really wanted to love the socks off it, but didn't. I couldn't. And there was a running thing that he did where they were like somebody would sing a line of a song and then he'd do a retort to that, and you know, I don't know. I just, and we never mentioned him singing as well. Why did they do that? Why did they get comedians to sing? It's blooming awful.
Because in those days they had to be all-round entertainers, didn't they?
Yeah.
Even Mike Yarwood, an impressionist of that era, huge in the 70s. He would end his show famously with, "And this is me," and then he'd sing with a very, very ordinary voice, I have to say, even trying to be polite. I mean, he could hold a tune, but no more than that.
Who was it that used to say, comedian, and say, and Mike Yarwood, he said he'd do all these impressions, he said, barely changing his persona throughout the 29 minutes. He said he'd do it the song at the end and he'd go, "And this is me," and he said, I go, "Oh my God, Mike, the scales have dropped from my eyes. It was you all along. I can't believe it."
I'm trying to remember. I thought you were going to quote it's Sean Locke, who sends up the idea of the comic who had to sing "Fly Me to the Moon" at the end of it, you know, and he did a dirty joke and then did a "Fly Me to the Moon," which wouldn't have happened in those days. Well, what can one say? I had Tom O'Connor on the show the other day, so maybe we should slab him, but only when you're in a better mood, you miserable so-and-so. Right, let's get the pain over then.
You always say this. It's like
you don't have to take
I'm only
it
not
seriously.
liking something because I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a great mood, but I just didn't think. And I think if anybody else had done those gags, I do wonder whether there's a bit of undue reverence because it's Les Dawson that you don't. If anybody else did those gags, you go, "What a pile of poo that was!" And
But they would have a different voice. So to some extent, yes. I mean, it's the classic thing. He probably could make you laugh reading out the phone book. But there's a richness to the voice. And yeah, I have those happy associations. Anyway, look, let's do the scoring before we all get too depressed.
okay,
Yours is clearly not, it's going to barely reach a single figure, I think, at this rate. Shall I go first?
yeah, go on.
I'm not going to go mad over this. In fact, I hadn't.
I thought you were going
really
to give it a
thought so,
6
no.
the way you're talking.
Nah.
Out of 5.
We should say to the ladies and gentlemen, it is out of 5, and then we tot them up to get it the score out of 10 between us. I'm going to give it 3.5, but if it's possible to have a very fond 3.5, that's what it is.
I'll give it 2 because it should get 1 really, but it's Les Dawson, so it gets an extra 1.
You see, so you give him that extra.
Yeah, I mean,
slack.
just yeah, but I told you my wife worked with him, didn't I? But she was in Panto with him.
You have said previously, yeah.
And I think I'm right in saying that. What did you give it? 3.5? Did you say? Sorry. That's
Yeah, so 5.5 out of 5.
I think I'm right in saying that he used to bring little treats for all the kids because I think he was probably Babes in the Wood or something like that, and she was only young at the time. But yeah, and because he got his own kids, hadn't he? He loved kids, and but she got really fond memories of him as well. Really, really nice guy, and
Just you out on your own as usual.
Yeah.
Mithering about. Okay. Well, how can you not love a show that's got the line "masticating my buttocks" in it? I mean, if that doesn't crack a smile, come on, you're laughing even when I say it.
I did laugh. There was a glimpse of him when he was talking about something, and he said about his wife. Oh, it was when they were. You see, I thought that sketch. There was a sketch where you could hear what the people were thinking.
Oh right.
And I thought, right, here we go.
get
I thought this is going to be good now, because that. I thought as a concept that was quite a good concept. You could go at that one, and even that didn't come to fruition. Apart from the line where he said they were talking about going on holiday, and he said, "I'll take the plane, and you can borrow your mother's broomstick," which was just like a kind of throwback to old Les, wasn't it? Really, there that we know and love. I did like that one, but there you go.
Yeah, there are some good lines in there, I think.
Yeah.
Don't believe the underhype from Shane. So we must turn to next week's homework then from you.
Oh, can I just say as well, I'd like to listen to something further down the line in the series just to see how it developed.
Well, especially when Mr. Barraclough gets involved.
Yes, yeah.
Sissy Spacek. Oh, I should say it's still on, as we speak, on BBC Sounds, but not for much longer. So if you're listening to this within a couple of weeks of when the show drops, if you'll pardon the expression, don't hang about. And if you miss it, there's loads of stuff out there on the YouTube.
I was going to say, if you miss it as well, don't forget, from what I can gather, I read a few bulletin boards that said it comes back regularly on Radio 4 now, or
4 extra,
wasn't it? Yeah. So it does get repeated. So I think they repeat it, and then that gets it a bit of time on the internet, doesn't it? Then really, but
and I would recommend, going to YouTube in any case, and put in Les Dawson feelings. That's one of my favourites. I won't say any more than that.
I know the one you're on about.
See, already you're laughing.
Yeah, I do like it. Okay, so for next week then, we're on shorts next week. The thing,
I'm wearing longs this week.
The thing, long johns. The thing that we're gonna slab for next week is only 11 minutes long.
I wonder if it's what I've noted for a future week that you're going to nick off me now.
Probably,
because there's a couple of acts that we've cropped up in other things in other guises on the slab previously.
Right. Maybe not then. I don't know. But so I don't. Do you want to do 2 episodes of 11 minutes each?
Yes, let's.
Okay. If I say to you, I don't know if you've heard of the comedian Spencer Jones.
No.
Okay. Neither had I until I was just doing a bit of wandering around the internet, and I came across his stand-up routine. And I can quite honestly say I have never seen a stand-up act like him. I won't tell you why, because I think it will kind of ruin you plunging into next week's homework, which is entitled The Mind of Herbert Clunkerdunk. Now, when I first saw it, I did wonder whether it was a children's program. And I'm assured it isn't. But again, his TV series they're only shorts, as I say, they're only 11 minutes long, and there's only 4 in a series, I'm led to believe, although he did do a pilot as well. And I have never seen TV like it. I've never seen TV comedy like it. Now, I think this could divide us big style. It has the potential. Well,
most things do, actually.
But I'm not going to tell you anymore, because I just want you to just experience it. And if you're listening to the podcast, and you can before the next episode, as it were, depending on when you're listening, before you listen to the next episode, if you can grab a squint at it yourself, I would be eternally grateful. It's on the iPlayer, and it will be for about the next year, I think, at least.
As we speak.
Sorry,
which episode?
We're going to look at series 1, and we're looking at episode 1 entitled Jingles, and episode 2 entitled Self-Tape.
Well, yeah, that could, in theory, work. Okay. What's that? There is a series with a female comedian, but in the guise of Kunk. Kunk's Britain.
Philomena Kunk.
Philomena Kunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about that sound that clearly is meant to elicit merriment.
Well, this is Herbert Clunkerdunk.
So the unk sound.
Yeah, the unk. Yeah. But yeah,
don't make my job harder.
Do you know what's interesting as well? I think comedy shorts are very much in vogue at the moment, because I saw Tim Key's done one as well, which is a kind of, although he famously we slabbed one of them, didn't we? The All Bar Luke, that were only 15 minutes an episode, that went out on radio, and he was the only actor in it. It was a one-hander, but he still had conversation. I thought it was quite clever, that one. But yeah, so I think shorts are quite in vogue at the moment. So it'd be
I
interesting
was wearing my comedy shorts back in the summer, but enough about that.
Put your comedy shorts on, yeah. But yeah, so there you go. That's next week's Homework, The Mind of Herbert Clunkerdunk. What a great name. I've just been going around saying it all the while. Have you seen Herbert Clunkerdunk?
It sounds like it could go horribly wrong, but it's probably fairly safe. It's not something that if you get a spoonerism that you can get into very hot water. Anyway, on anti-social media, we are somewhat inevitably at Comedy Slab on the twits, as Mark Riley would say. Thank you, Mark. And on the Book of Face, that famous book from the Apocrypha, for good Catholics everywhere like Shane, then we are similarly at Comedy Slab. So please like that page if you would, and follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, and don't forget you can catch all the other episodes and this episode, and you can make sure that you never miss an episode by subscribing to the many places that you can find the Comedy Slab podcast, like Apple Podcasts. That's what it's called this week, isn't it? They haven't changed the name again.
I believe so.
And Spreaker and Stitcher and iHeartRadio. I always want to do that in a Scottish accent. I don't know why. iHeartRadio. Do you heart radio? Well, you better do it, eh? Otherwise, I'll fix you. So yes, that's.
You could be on Clyde FM.
That's where you can. That's where you can
find
find
jokes sound. Yes, indeed. And why wouldn't you want to find us? Don't answer that. Now. Could you please also kindly recommend the Comedy Slab to friends and family, or if you don't like it, recommend us to enemies? Either way, we get the word around the globe. And join the hat. Do you remember that act? I'm really going back into the past, where this guy comes on stage and it's another. You think it's going to be just another ordinary song, and it's going on and on. You think, well, I don't recognise the tune. He's not a particularly brilliant singer. But then he comes to the chorus and it's, and the hands of love around the world will be extended. And these arms grow out of his coat.
Who did that?
I don't remember his name, but
that sounds like a
very niche act.
Doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but except Kenny would have been around by then, but it's just because you didn't see it coming. But then I thought afterwards, and knowing what we know about the brutal business we called show, I mean, You take that round the country, you wouldn't survive 5 minutes today because it'd be on social media. And then, right, what are you going to do for an encore?
Next? Yeah.
So what's your shtick? Well, my arms get long during the chorus.
Yeah, you finished.
I admire him.
You're right. It's the way we consume it now. It's completely different, isn't it? But it's even worse now, I think, isn't it? For my brother was telling me though yesterday about. Have you heard of a musician called Buckethead?
Oh. Well, no, I was thinking of the guy who would be MP standing against the late Theresa May. That was Buckethead, wasn't it?
I don't know. This guy wears a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket on his head.
I'm laughing.
And a white face mask. No, he's a guitarist. He's not a comedian. He played with. I think he played with Guns N' Roses. I think he replaced Slash and Guns N' Roses, but then left them. And then Ozzy Osbourne. He was going to work with him. And Ozzy said, mate, you've got to take the effing bucket off your head. You don't need all that crap. It's but I think he's produced like over 100 albums. This guy.
Did he crop up in Ideal, or am I imagining it?
No, that was Cartoon Head.
Cartoon Head.
Who got a mouse mask super glued to his face. You couldn't make it up, because you couldn't make it up.
You couldn't.
Come on.
On which note, I think we should take our leave of you as the stars rotate in their orbits, and I see the mighty Orion in the sky. I think I must fix the roof of the Kazi.
Yeah, and from me, I just think I gotta stop upsetting Adrian. I gotta put on a happy face.
Happy face. Some chance of that, mate.